When you start out as a brand new photographer, all of the settings on a DSLR camera can be overwhelming. What I've learned during my photography journey is it's best to just start with the basics. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Cassie and I make videos about photography and videography and photo and video editing and things like that. So if you like that type of content, make sure to subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss anything. In today's video, I'm going to be focusing on the three main basic settings of a DSLR camera. So that is aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. I'm going to be showing you these settings on my personal camera, which is the Canon Rebel T6i. I just wanted to put a quick disclaimer into the video that if you are using a different type of camera, some of these settings might work a little bit differently or look different than what you'll see in this video. I'm going to start with the most complicated of the three settings in my opinion, the one that was the hardest for me to fully grasp, and that is aperture. Aperture is basically the size of the hole in front of your camera lens. I have seen it referred to as the pupil of your camera. This metaphor was probably the thing that really helped me understand this. If you've ever had your eyes dilated at the optometrist, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. Because your pupils are so big, your eye lets in so much more light and it makes it really hard to focus on things. The aperture of your camera works the exact same way. The larger the hole, the more light that comes in. The size of this hole is measured by f-stops or f-numbers. The smaller the f-number, the larger the hole. This is what made this the hardest setting for me. My instinct always wants to tell me that a higher number equals a larger hole, but that just isn't the case in this setting. So how does the aperture affect your images? Great question. Just like the other two settings that we are going to be looking at today, the aperture does affect the exposure of your image, but it also is going to affect the depth of field. If you have your camera at a smaller f number, for example f4.5, you will have a shorter depth of field and your photo will be more exposed. So this means that your subject will be in focus, the background will be blurred, and it will be brighter. If you have your camera set to a larger f-stop, for example f16, you will have a longer depth of field and your photo will be less exposed. So this means that your subject will be in focus, but so will the background, and the image will be less exposed, so it will not be as bright because less light is being let into the lens. The next setting we'll be looking at is shutter speed. This refers to the length of time that your shutter stays open while taking the picture. The shutter speed is measured in fractions of a second. The larger the fraction, the longer the shutter stays open. The shutter speed affects the exposure of the image, but it also affects how motion is portrayed in that picture. If you have your camera set to a faster shutter speed, like 1/800th of a second, the motion will be frozen and the photo will be less exposed. This means that whatever is moving in your image will be frozen in place and the image will be darker. If your camera is set to a slower shutter speed, like 1/4 of a second, motion will be blurred and the photo will be more exposed. So this means that you'll be able to see the movement of the object and the photo will be brighter. The final setting we're going to look at today is ISO. So this should really only be used when you can't achieve the brightness of the image that you're looking for with just the shutter speed and aperture. So as opposed to the first two settings that let in more natural light, ISO makes up for the lack of natural light by providing an artificial light in the photo. ISO is measured in numbers, usually ranging anywhere from 100 to 6400. So the larger the ISO number, the brighter the image will be. As I mentioned before, you should really only use this when you have to, because the higher the ISO, the more grainy or noisy your photo will be. Because of this, keeping your camera at its base ISO, especially for outdoor photography, is usually ideal. ISO can be useful or even necessary when you're indoors and you don't have enough natural light. Most DSLR cameras have different modes for how to use these settings. If you are just using autofocus on your camera, you won't really need to worry about these settings because the camera will figure them out for you. In manual, you will adjust both the aperture and the shutter speed, and you can also change the ISO, or you can leave it on auto or whatever the base ISO is. In aperture priority, you set the aperture to whatever you want it to be, and the camera will set the ISO and the shutter speed. In shutter priority, you set the shutter speed and the camera will automatically set the aperture and the ISO. The best way to truly understand these settings is to experiment with them yourself. I hope this video was enough information to let you know what each of these settings does. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a beautiful day, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!